Hello everyone, and welcome to your first video lecture in our new format. So before you guys left for spring break, we were about to finish up chapter 19. And so we only have a couple of sections left, 19.7 electric hazards and 19.8, which I will say a few things about digital multimeters. So I will warn you off the bat, I am terrible at making lecture videos. I assume I will get better as we finish out the semester, but for right now it is incredibly awkward. But we will get through this. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is short circuits, and your book doesn't really go into this in great detail. But it is worth mentioning in this section. So what a short circuit is when unintentionally an alternate path is introduced into a circuit. This is a path of lower resistance, and remember, current takes the path of least resistance. And so this results in this unintentional diversion of current. So in this situation, if we have a battery and we have a wire attached and we want it to go through this light bulb, if there's a wire attached between this point and this point, this wire has less resistance than this path that includes the light source. So the current flows through this path instead and back around to the negative terminal. So this can cause higher currents than intended in your circuit, and which can cause, in turn, overheating of circuit elements. So a short circuit can also occur when you have multiple elements in a circuit and two of those elements accidentally touch. So kind of the obvious thing that we think about when we talk about electrical hazards, aside from fires from overheating, is electric shock. So two forms of damage result from electric shock. One, you have burns from the superheating of tissue, and two, you have stimulation of nerves and muscles. So the second is especially hazardous if you have current that is passing through vital organs, especially the heart and brain. Remember, a lot of your communication inside your body depends on electrical impulses, and so these can be disrupted by electric shock. So the amount of damage depends on a few things. One, the magnitude of the current and the time for which the current acts. And two, it largely depends on the path that the current takes through the body. And like we said, currents through the brain and heart are especially dangerous. So let's talk about magnitudes first. So I found this graphic, and usually this goes from bottom up, from least current to most current. Okay, so for us to feel an electric shock, it has to be on the order of the lower limit of about 1 milliamp. So typically a static electric shock that we get from rubbing our feet on the floor, especially in the winter, and then touching something metal like a doorknob, that is typically on the order of about 1 milliamp. So not pleasant, but not damaging. As we move up this chart, we get more of a sensation, and at about 10 milliamps, it starts to become painful. At much above this, um, it is hard to let go of the thing that is shocking you. And this goes from 10 milliamps up to 100 milliamps. So as you get nearer to 100 milliamps, you have shock, disruption in breathing or labored breathing. And this range here between 100 and 200 milliamps, this is what is called the lethal zone. So what happens in this zone? So if current in this range passes through your heart, normally your heart has a nice periodic rhythm. And if we look at this graphic, this is actually tachycardia, meaning that the heart is beating too fast. However, as you can see, it has a nice, somewhat periodic rhythm. With currents between 100 and 200 milliamps, we get this chaotic spasming in the heart. So if this lasts for longer than a second or two, the heart endures irreparable damage. So at that point, with the heart violently spasming, you incur damage so much that your heart can not be restarted or cannot be restarted to a regular rhythm. So that's why this range is so potentially lethal. At currents higher than this, when the shock occurs, the heart essentially clamps shut, so you don't have that chaotic spasming. So beyond this, the heart will either return to a regular rhythm if the shock is really short, or if the heart stops, you can usually be resuscitated. Now, with high currents, there's a secondary consideration here. Remember, it's not only electrical impulse disruption within the body, but you also incur damage for tissue damage from burns. So, to tell you a little story about this, when I was younger, my father was working on our electrical system in our bathroom, and he accidentally touched a live wire. And so he reached in and he was working through this hole in the wall, and he accidentally touched the live wire. Well, his elbow was resting against a metal clothes dryer. So the current entered through his hand and exited out a spot on his forearm near the elbow. So if you do get shocked, remember that current takes the path of least resistance. So where the current enters, if a part of your body is touching something that provides a path of lower resistance, such as something metal, then the current will exit your body through that point. So in his case, he didn't have any vital organ damage, but he had a massive electrical burn hole in his arm. And sometimes, like you can see with electrical burns, if you're curious, look this up on the internet. It's really gross, but you can get this kind of necrosis. And like the injury that he has, it was a hole essentially that kind of followed the path that the electricity had taken. So really dangerous stuff. If you're ever doing anything with electrical wiring, make sure your breakers are off or let a professional do it. So kind of along those lines, let's look at this graphic. So this graphic on the left here gives some approximate paths or approximate resistances between 2 points on your body. Remember, like potential difference, resistance is one of those things that is measured between 2 points. So when we talk about resistance in general, or resistance of your body, we're talking about the resistance that's incurred between 2 points. So, for example, from ear to ear has a resistance of about 100 ohms, which is not much. So if you incurred a shock on your ear from, or between your ears, of 110 volts, you would have a current of approximately 1.1 amps pass across your brain, which I can say is very, very damaging. So hand to foot is another common path in electric shocks. So if current enters through your hand and exits through your foot, that difference is about 500 ohms. Now, I'm assuming that this is probably under conditions such as damp skin. Dry skin provides a much higher resistance. And so if we go calculate using the lower end of resistance, it's about 100,000 ohms with completely dry skin. So this would be about 1.1 milliamps. So with a 110 volt source, you would feel a mild shock, similar to that you would feel with static electricity. So wet skin is substantially lower. So wet skin, I don't know if I agree with this figure here, but wet skin is about 1,000 ohms resistance, which is a lot lower. So you can get a really good shock. And if you notice with wet skin, current passing through your body would be on the order of 110 milliamps. So if the path passed through your heart, that would be in the lethal range. Now, in order to incur an electrical shock, or what happens when we do incur an electrical shock, is when we complete a circuit, unintentionally complete a circuit, right? So if we grab a live wire, say, such as in this graphic, say this is a current source like in your home. So you have a live wire and then you have a ground wire. So if you grab the live wire and you are standing on your carpet, you can imagine that this current will travel through your body and then out through your foot. Now, because you are standing on the ground here, you are what is called grounded. And remember, we said that the earth is a ground because it can readily accept and give up charge. So you are creating a potential difference. There is a potential difference between your hand here and where your foot is touching the ground. Now, notice this person is barefoot. So this is a bare skin touching the ground. Now, if you have on something such as thick rubber-soled shoes, that rubber on the bottom of your shoes creates an interruption in that current, right? Because rubber is an insulator. So you're no longer grounded. Or say this person was magical and they could fly. If they were just touching the wire itself and not grounded, then they would not receive a shock. So this graphic on the right, this is interesting. So the let go current, the minimum of which Anything above that, you cannot physically let go of the thing that is shocking you, is higher for males than it is females. I did not know that. And so this is just like a little facts about being shocked at different currents. And so the resistance between your two hands and two legs there's a mistake here. This should say 500 milliohms to 50 kiloohms. That is not incorrect. Anyway, I got this graphic off the internet. So this 500 milliamps is not right. 50 kiloohms, I believe. But I digress. So that is all for electric shock and electric hazards. Stay tuned for my next mini lecture on digital multimeters.